Hello, this is John from kevolveprogramming.com, and this is just a little one-off tutorial on shortcuts in the Eclipse IDE for Java developers. So I'm just going to show you a few of my favorite shortcuts and some little tips and tricks that you might not know. So I've got a project here and I'm going to give it a main class. I'm just right-clicking and going to new class, call this app. And if you want to give a class a main method, of course you can tick this box here. But if you don't tick that box, a quick way to do it is click inside your class, type main and control space, and then just hit return there, and that will give you a main method. Now you can see that this is badly formatted, and one of my absolute favorite shortcuts is Control Shift F, F for format. So if I do Control Shift and F, it formats my code for me, and that can save you huge amounts of time, because beginners, like when we start coding, most of us don't format our code well, and we can end up staring at things for ages trying to find a bug that would have been obvious if the code had been formatted correctly. So Control Shift F is really useful. And if you forget the shortcut, if you just right click and go to source, you can see it's here, format, and there's the shortcut Control Shift and F. Another really useful one that's particularly good for debugging is if you type sysout and control space, then it auto-completes this system.out.println, which of course you can output things in a console with. But even if you're writing a GUI program, if you can put in these sysouts and use them to debug your application a little bit. So if I run this, and to actually run your application, in fact, if you press F11, that will run your application in debug mode. And debug mode might be a little bit slower than normal mode, but apart from that, unless you've set breakpoints, it's basically equivalent to running it in the normal way. And you can find that shortcut under the Run menu here. You can see to run it in normal mode is Control plus F11, and in debug mode, which is usually fine, just hit F11. Now another extremely useful shortcut is Control Shift I for adding an import. So let's say I've got a variable here of type list. I'll just call it list, and I want to add the import for the list interface. I can press Control Shift and, did I say I? Sorry, I meant O. Control Shift O, like that. And if there's multiple possibilities, you'll get this coming up, and you have to choose the one you want. So I want Java util list, and just click finish, and it adds the import at the top here. And it will even remove imports that you don't need. So let's say I have array list another, and I add the import for that with Control Shift O. O stands for organize imports. Then it will add array list there, and let's say I no longer needed list. I'll just comment this out, if I can remember where the key is on this keyboard. Here we go. So if I do Control Shift O again, it will remove the unused import. So Control Shift and O, it stands for organize imports, and don't be afraid to use that. There's no need to add imports yourself. I don't see any advantage to it. Just use that shortcut. And if you right click here and you go to source, you can see that organize imports is there, and it's Control Shift and O. Okay, so we've covered sysout. Oh yeah, sysair as well is can be quite useful if you want to put some if you want to have some console output that's going to be printed in red. If you do sysair, you can print the error output stream, and that looks just a little bit different. So I typed sysair and I did Control space again, like with sysout, and now if I just run this with F11, you can see that this comes out in red down here to alert you to there being an error. If you want to rename a variable, let's make this a little bit more complex. Let's say another here equals new array list, and again I'll do Control Shift O to add the import. I've already got it, maybe. Oh yeah, of course I already have it. But now supposing I decide to rename this variable, if I just right click on it and go to refactor, and I thought it was in there. Actually, let me make sure I've selected the variable, right click, go to refactor, rename at the top here. So I think you have to have it selected. And there is apparently an Alt-Shift-R shortcut for this, but I never can remember it. So if you just right click and go to refactor and then rename it, and then you can just type in another name there. So let's say some list, and you see it's automatically renaming all occurrences of the variable, so it's really useful. You can rename a class as well. If you right click on the class file here in the left hand pane and go to refactor, rename. So let's change this to main and click next. So it's found all the places where all the bits that might need refactoring, and I'm just going to click finish, and you see it changes the name of the class as well as the name of the file, so that saves you some work. Oh yeah, and another good one that's sometimes very useful is find references. So let's say I want to find all the places where I've used this variable. If I right click and go to references, and I can choose any of these, but let's say workspace, so I want to find all the, actually let's say project, I want to find all the references, all the places this variable is used in a project. If I click that, then down here after a while searching, it will show me all the places where this variable is used. And if you want to go to the place where a variable is declared, so let's click on this and you press just press F3, and you see it would jump to the declaration of it. So even if you have some class that's declared in another file, that will work. Let me just show you that. So if I go to new class and I call this temp, click finish, and now in main let's just have a variable of type temp. So I click on this temp variable and actually click on the class name here, the type, and press F3. It goes to the place where it's declared. So that's quite useful. If you want to, another really good one actually is removing lines. So if you want to remove some lines, just click in the line and press anywhere in the line and do Control D like this, and you can remove entire lines in the editor, which I really like because it saves you selecting the thing. It actually saves quite a lot of hassle. And you should be aware, of course, that a lot of things in Eclipse will sort of auto-complete if you kind of type them the right way. So supposing I want an array list here, if I just type, I start typing like A and then just press Control space and just carry on typing, and the case doesn't even matter. So I'm typing lowercase l, but you see it's gone to the place in the list that matches what I'm typing. Apart from the case, it's ignoring case, and I can just hit return then when the right entry is selected, and it completes array list for me, which is great. And similarly, let's say you're creating a function. Well, this isn't really similar, but it's handy to know. Let's say I create a public or a private static, I'll just call it func, put the brackets in there, open a bracket. Here we go. You don't have to type the closing bracket, because when I hit return now, it will just put the closing bracket in, which is very handy. And also with comments, multi-line comments, if I type /* here, then hit return, it's auto-completing the comment for me. So that's quite handy. I should have had a void or something in there actually. That's almost it. That's almost all the ones that I know. Except that I can show you now a really quick way to create a so-called bean class. Like supposing you've got a class and you want it to have getters and setters and possibly a custom constructor or two. And then of course you might want to add other methods yourself. You can do that really quickly using Eclipse. So let's right click here and go to new class, and I'll call this my old standby person, and click finish. And now I'll give person some private fields like private string name, and I'll say maybe private int ID, and so on. You could keep adding fields like this. You can generate getters and setters automatically by right clicking and going to source and generate getters and setters, and here you can select the fields you want to use to generate your getters and setters, which ones you want to generate getters and setters for, and of course you can expand if you want and just have getters or just setters or whatever. So let's tick these and click OK, and I've got my get and set methods, and I can format that with the the shortcut I showed you before, Control-Shift-F, like that. And now often you want to create a specialized constructor for your class, and you can do that just by right clicking and going to source, generate constructor using fields, and again you can tick the fields that you want to be arguments to your constructor and click OK, and hey presto, I've got a constructor with the right parameters, and it sets the instance variables correctly. It's got this call to super as well, which isn't needed in this case, so I can delete that just by clicking somewhere in the line and doing Control D, and I'll do Control D to delete some blank lines. And finally, as far as I can think, you may know this already, but if you want to override methods in a superclass, then so the superclass of person is object, and if I just right click here, I can go to source, override implement methods, and there you can choose methods from the superclass to override. So let's say, I don't know, clone, I could override the clone class, and it tries to put in a kind of implementation that just calls the parent implementation, so it will just work by default, but of course you can then change it to do what you want yourself. And I should mention these other things in that menu, because if I go to source, and there's also some really useful stuff like principally generate hash code and equals, because that will literally automatically generate a hash code and a equals method for you using the fields that you specify. So you can now compare your objects using .equals, and you can put them in hashes as keys if you want, because it's generated a hash code using these fields. So that's it. I think that's all the ones that I use myself. Have fun with that, and until next time. Oh yeah, and of course go to caveofprogramming.com if you want to find more tutorials and more stuff like this. And until next time, happy coding.